Okay, so good afternoon. We start this session with a lecture by Professor Jonathan Newton. Over to you.
Hi, thank you very much. Into the final lap for me. I promised something very different to perturbed dynamics in various games, and so that's what I'm going to give you. Don't know how long it'll take. Maybe we finish a bit early if we're lucky. Who knows? We shall see. I've already been told, I started off, my first lecture was a little bit too slow, and then the end of the last one was a little bit too fast. So I'm not going to promise any kind of Goldilocks solution here. Instead, we'll probably just bounce back to the other failure point, right? But we shall see. Anyway, the goal of this is that you leave here today, and obviously if you don't know it already, with a little bit of at least with something new to take with you and maybe think about. So I've written here, the evolution of collaboration, definitely not cooperation, right? Obviously, it's going to be mathematically distinguished and very different. It doesn't contradict it at all, it's just different. But if I were to say, hey, let's go to the cafe. Yeah, you say yes. You say, okay, we're off to the cafe now, we'll leave you guys here. That's fine. I mean, in my sense, we're collaborating. Whether or not we're cooperating is another thing, but we've agreed to do something we both like. We've agreed to engage in something to our mutual benefit. And that doesn't necessarily have to involve any kind of altruism, right? I could say, see that chap over there, he looks quite rich. Yeah, you can tell. He's got a nice dark green shirt on. He's smiling to pretend he's not wealthy. I don't think I can overpower him on my own. But with your help, I think we've got this. We can take all of his money. So there we're making a decision to mutually adjust our strategy. We're adjusting our strategy together as a coalition to do something that's good for us, but we're not altruistic, I'm afraid. You can't say we're playing C in any kind of prisoner's dilemma. We're playing for us. Now, okay, you might say, this seems like obviously a good thing to be able to undertake that kind of activity, right? I mean, the ability to participate in activities that are characterized by let's do this. Yeah, okay. Let's do this as a group. Seems like something that's obviously good. Seems like the ability to do that, or the desire to do that in a given situation, the desire to team up with other people to improve your own situation might be an obviously good thing, right? Now, of course, it often is a good thing. But sometimes it might not be a good thing. And so to give you some of the kind of conclusions that you'll take away first, before you go to sleep, you can imagine a situation in which, well, there's three of us, and it takes at least two of us to participate in some kind of act to produce some kind of public good that will benefit all three of us. Now, in this case, it's kind of collaborating to cooperate in some sense, right? But we need at least two of us. So if the status quo is that none of us are pitching in to solve this public goods problem, then we're not doing so well. But if at least two of us could get together to solve it, that might be good. So I might say, will you join with me? Will you join with me to solve this problem? And if you understand the question, or if you're in the mood, you could think of it that way as well, if you're in a collaborative mood, then you will join with me. in such a situation, if one person is just not able to understand the question or is not in a collaborative mood, they could gain, because they could be a free rider on the other two of us collaborating to cooperate in such a situation. So that's just one example of how what seems like it would be an obviously good thing, the ability to undertake jointly intentional strategic changes, may not always win. So this was, well, before I first got into thinking about this stuff years ago, there were numerous inspirations, and some of them came from, say, developmental anthropology, say reading the works of Michael Tomasello about children's development, and then works on chimpanzees' abilities, or not, to work together with one another. But also I was inspired by philosophy work. And there's a good paper by John Searle, Collective Intentions and Actions, where he says, in his paper, he talks about collective intentions and collective actions. And his argument is that there's a qualitative difference between them and between the accumulation of individual intentions and actions. So to read this, the intuition is collective intentional behavior is a primitive phenomenon which cannot be analyzed as just the summation of individual intentional behavior, and collective intentions expressed in the form, we intend to do such and such, are also primitive phenomena and cannot be analyzed in terms of individual intentions expressed in the forms, I intend to do such and such. So what he's really kind of making is a kind of separability argument, right? He's saying that some things that we might do together aren't necessarily analyzable or easily analyzable just by separating us and making us play a non-cooperative game with one another. Now, I'm not here to make that point, right? There is a philosophy literature on that, and if you're interested, I can point you off in the direction of lots of ink spilt on it, and also some very beautiful papers. Here's some examples of some jointly intentional activities we participate in. Pushing a car, Searle mentions that. Painting a house, so that's Bratman. These are all good citations in this literature. And going for a walk together, which is a really beautiful paper by Margaret Gilbert that analyzes the phenomenon of going for a walk together with someone else, which you should definitely read because it's tremendous fun. It starts off saying, well, if you're just walking along at night, say, and a mysterious person in a cloak comes alongside you and matches your step, are you going for a walk together? And the answer seems to be no, and then she works from that. Yes. Anyway, I had lunch with her when I visited Irvine, and yes, tremendous company as well as a great researcher. So in economics, we have the firm and the household. These are entities that we sometimes consider as agents that undertake intentional activity. So in the same way that individual intentions or individual strategies or attempts to carry out strategies can be made subject to constraints or rules at an individual level, shared ones can be made subject to constraints or rules at a collective level. In a kind of quick and dirty way, illustrated by a co-author, shared intentions plus optimization gives us collective agency, directed agency that we can analyze through game theory with coalitions in it. Now, yeah, and of course a lot of work's been done in game theory on what happens when there are coalitions acting in games. What happens when we have coalitions in games? What solution concepts are good? How might things be different? But this strand of literature is more focused towards, the strand of literature I'm going to tell you about is focused towards the evolution of that trait itself, the trait of being able to participate in coalitions, right? Which seems to be something rather fundamental, the ability to partake in these kind of let's activities. Now, a lot of work's been done on the evolution of preferences, assuming preferences are held at the individual level. So that's saying you can have a preference, which is generally some mapping of some aspects of the game, typically a mapping from payoffs to the things that determine your choices, the things that you optimize over the preferences. So you could look at, say, the evolution of altruism, the evolution of some level of empathetic preferences, the evolution of some kind of Kantian do unto others as others would do to you type thing. I kind of mangled that. But so that's been studied. So why not make the unit of agency subject to evolutionary selection? Actually, a simple way to put it is, if you allow me a couple of seconds, you could write not quite paraphrasing Lenin, right? I think Lenin was what? Who, whom, kto, kogo. But we've got who does what to who, or who does what to whom, right? Correct me if my grammar is wrong. Or you could say who does what with whom as well. Those are fundamental questions about behavior, about any activity we see, about anything that's going on. And people have looked at the evolution of what? Like, what are you doing? If you're playing a prisoner's dilemma, are you playing C or are you playing D? Yeah. How are you acting? Are you being altruistic? Are you being spiteful? You can think of the to whom bit as being dealt with by literatures on assortativity, right? It's who are you being matched to, who are people matched to undertake games or activities. And so we're thinking about this. Who are the who? Okay, they're banned from the 1960s, but who are the who that we're going to consider in our models? Is it going to have a look at a very simple model today? It could be individuals, could be coalitions of people collaborating to achieve some end. So how's it so far, Sagar? Is it too slow, too fast? Of course, you can't speak for everyone, right? I've asked you a question you don't know the answer to. You can't even make eye contact with them right now, so there's no way of even guessing. Okay, so the question is, why not make the unit of agency subject to evolutionary selection? Basically, this is, I can't believe I actually managed to publish the diagram with lightning bolts in it in an economics journal, but it's not something we do, right? I mean, this, but I did. Anyway, this is a brief, you can see behavior here, you've got preferences going into behavior, you've got other features of behavior, so it's imitative, myopic, adaptive, farsighted, you've got agency, individualistic, you've got non-cooperative theory, individual intentions, cooperative theory, and then you can go from behavior to outcomes, and you could explicitly model it through best response dynamics, or through imitative dynamics, or through reproductive dynamics. And, well, we should do it through the models that Christian's explained to us so well in his lectures of this talk. And then another way of doing it is through the indirect method, which is a quick and easy way that is particularly popular in economics, where we say, we want to look at, say, the evolution of preferences. So we take some preferences, and how do we map from preferences to behavior? Well, they say, we take the preferences and we find a Nash equilibrium, and then you look at that Nash equilibrium, you take the payoffs, the raw payoffs from that preference is defined over, and you use those payoffs as fitness regarding the so when you're looking at, are these preferences beating these ones? See which ones lead to higher payoffs. And we are following this red line here. We've got behavior, outcomes, norms. Today, we're going to use a bit of an indirect method. So we have some rules on how to go from behavior to outcomes, norms. And then from the outcome, you'll see that people with the collaborative trait do better or worse than people without the collaborative trait. And so you get an evolution of agency. That's what we do today. There is relatively little on this. And if I can explain this hideously ugly slide matter, it's because I decided to work with, well, say, my latest stuff on this involves Maximin. I didn't think you were ready for Maximin if you didn't know it yet. So even though it's very nice. And so I used some old slides, but unfortunately I did them in PowerPoint. It was my PowerPoint era. And it turns out that PowerPoint is no longer compatible with PowerPoint. So thank you, Microsoft. And it meant that when I tried to change it, all of the maths turned into a stream of ASCII. So instead, I carefully went through a PDF file covering up things with white rectangles and then adding text over where, so anytime you see something weird, it's because of that. And also because M in my old paper is N in the new paper, and N in the old paper is M in the new paper. So I'm hoping I successfully did switches where I have to. Anyway, there's a small number of papers on that. This chap, Bacharach, wrote a book about it. He was talking about whether you'd expect this working together with other people, as coalitions to evolve. He had a mainly qualitative argument. He looked at coordination games, and also he had a kind of group selection argument. And we basically threw Baccarat into a simulations model for coordination games with group selection, and showed that sometimes he's right and sometimes he's not right. Essentially because collaboration, working together with other people, can speed movement to efficient social norms, to efficient norms in a society. And that goes together with his argument. But if your parameters are slightly different, essentially there's a phase transition, it slows it down. So you can actually get poverty traps that are caused by, or low efficiency traps that are caused by too much coordination. And that's very easy to think about socially, because it's where somebody tries something, a group of innovators breaks out, and they're kind of stable in some sense within the population, and they're individually stable, so they can't change back on their own, but if they could get together, they'd say, hey, let's stop being weird together, guys, and switch back. And so there's a separate paper on, well, actually, no, just look at that one. I looked at it for a wide variety of games and groups, no group selection, and that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about in the next however many minutes I'm talking. Roosh did some with 2x2 games, very good, and imperfect type recognition. So today, when I meet someone, I can tell who can collaborate or not, basically. I say, hey, let's do this, and you say, yes, that's great. I say, hey, let's do this, and you go, what are you talking about, right? So I can tell which is which. He has some imperfect type recognition in his model. It's very nice paper. And then some later stuff looking at Maximin choice. Important, in case you hadn't got this from the title page, which was new today, by the way. This is not about the evolution of cooperation, which is, of course, a great literature on its own. I will have some cooperation in example because we like cooperation in examples, and that's why I was writing that over there. But in general, no. The ability to share intentions, so we're going to have these SI types, that's the traits we're going to look at, affects the level of agency at which optimization can occur, not the preferences of the individuals themselves, right? So there. It's a level of agency, not the preferences of individuals, and it does not imply any altruism. From our example of the robbers earlier, where it does not imply any altruism. Jointly intentional behavior is mutualistic, benefiting all parties to the behavior. Apparently, I've achieved my daily movement goal while standing here. So it's just good news, one piece of good news after the other. Right, the overall setup is quite standard. It's going to be a diagram soon. It's a population of individuals, and groups of individuals will be drawn from the population and matched to play a game, and how they play the game will determine their fitness. We have a population. It's just unit mass of population. There's going to be a couple of types. These are the SI types, the types who can share intentions and collaborate. So this is XSI, represents them. And then we've got the N types who can't. So two types of people in the world, the ones who can and the ones who can't. You could think, if you wanted, you could also think of a state space where this was just the probability of which, if you could have a symmetric model where everyone was symmetric and that was the probability that you were feeling in a collaborative mood any given day. But I think it's simpler for now to think of these as individual types, guys who can collaborate and the guys who can't. We're going to have some matching. People are going to be drawn from the population and matched to play a game. So here you see we have 3 people being taken out. And you see 2 of them are SI types from this part, and 1 of them is an N type. And they're matched to play a game. And they're going to play the game, and how they play the game depends on their traits, of course, depends on their types. You're going to get an outcome given the types, and the outcome is going to lead to expected payoffs, which we'll call fitness, of each type. So this is given the share of each type in the population. So that's X. X is a spectre of XSI and XN. You're going to get an expected payoff, and given the matching technology of how you're matching people together, and given how an outcome is determined when they play the game, given their types, you're going to get expected payoffs. Now, these expected payoffs, if we regard them as fitness, allow us to say, well, what's the stable share of each type in the population? So if I let there be a y-axis, which is fitness difference between SI types and N types, you might get something like this. You see over here, I mean, this is pretty standard for you, of course. You've got SI type has a higher fitness than N type, so the share of SI types increases. Whereas over here, it's the opposite. SI types have lower fitness, so their share decreases. And we have this stable point here. Of course, it's not always going to look like that. It could look like this, where you have a couple of stable points, and the one we just looked at there, and also one here where there are no SI types in the population, where if we start off with no SI types, it's locally asymptotically stable to, well, perturbations, effectively. Is that diagram, yes, is that diagram clear to most people? Are you with me? That's good, okay, great.
Which dynamics are we thinking about here when you say?
Just think of replicator dynamics, just, yeah. But it's basically anything that shifts you in the direction of the type that has the higher fitness. But yeah, in the paper we say, and for replicator dynamics, it should be stable. So, everyone's with me still. This is good, and we still have 56 minutes or less. The model has 3 parts. I'm probably going to lose you in the second part. I don't know. So we're going to have a game, right? We're going to have a game. And we're going to have an M-player game, gamma. Perhaps we should work through the example as we go. So here's an M-player game, right? This example, we've just got strategy 0 for defect and 1 for cooperate over here, right? So, and then we've got a player set M, yes. Strategy sets SI, so as we've used before, SI, big SI is the strategies for each player I. Representative strategies given by small SI, S for a profile, and big S for a set of strategy profiles. Payoffs, again, pi, so pi I S is the payoff of player I at S. So far, the same as before, only today we're using M. For some weird reason, at that time I used M instead of N for the player set. But so far, so good. This is weird. What's this? This is new, this thing at the bottom. We're going to have a status quo of the game. That's also a band, but this time from the 80s rather than the 60s, I think. Anyway, we have a status quo, which we'll represent by this cross with a line underneath it. And it's going to specify, well, they can be different strategies for each player, but a strategy profile that is considered to be the status quo of the game. And it's going to be, we assume it's a Nash equilibrium of the game. These assumptions are not without loss of generality, and you can go beyond them, you can talk about them, but yeah. Assume a Nash equilibrium, one of them is a status quo. Then the question is, are groups of players who collaborate going to move to something other than the status quo? So if you think about prisoner's dilemma, the status quo is everybody's defecting, right? I mean, that's the only Nash equilibrium, so therefore it must be the status quo. So far, so good. And oh, here, this is the M player prisoner's dilemma. So why have only 2, right? So M player prisoner's dilemma is where you've got a cost that's more than the benefit. If everybody contributes, that's more than the cost, right? Otherwise, there's nothing really interesting that can happen. You've got these payoffs here where you're getting a B from everybody who contributes, and you might be paying a cost C if you're cooperating yourself, right? So a B from everyone who cooperates, a cost C if you're cooperating yourself. There's the 2-player version of it. Okay, so far so good. PG is an assumption that appears in a theorem. It's a condition. What does PG say? It says if somebody else plays something different from the status quo, it doesn't hurt you relative to the status quo. What does PG stand for? Can anybody guess? Yes, public goods. So it's kind of public goods problem where typically the starting point we're considering is where everybody's doing something that's kind of suboptimal on a societal level. So when somebody else plays, if someone does something other than the status quo, it doesn't hurt you relative to the status quo. And it's satisfied for appropriate status quo, because sometimes you have multiple Nash equilibria, and you'll have to choose one as the status quo, by M-person prisoner's dilemmas, threshold public goods, trust games, centipede games, Nash demand games, Bertrand oligopoly, minimum effort games. Look at the 2017 paper if you want to see some of these. I think I might still have a footnote in that paper where I say something like, at least I thought was clever about it being whether it's a prisoner's dilemma, it's about where you put the apostrophe. If you put the apostrophe after the S, it becomes kind of collective problem rather than an individualistic one.
I'm a bit confused with the notation. So you're saying it doesn't hurt relative to status quo?
Yes.
But then why was greater than sign? If I don't play status quo, I get more?
So let's have a look. So for all players, they're not the same player. We have that if player J plays, so we're looking at player J's payoff, so how he's affected by player I's behavior. So if player I, and so we're looking at player I possibly playing SI, that's or possibly playing the status quo. And it's saying that it's always at least as much as the status quo. From player J's point of view, the worst thing that could happen, well, the worst thing for player I to do, from player J's point of view, is to play the status quo. That gives player J the lowest possible payoff, right? So basically, the worst thing you could do for me is to stay at the status quo. You know, so if you move, it doesn't hurt me.
I have a question. So the S minus I, should it be status quo minus I or any arbitrary S minus I?
Any arbitrary S minus I. Yes, any arbitrary S minus I. That's
So
a,
status quo is sort of like
yes,
worst case.
so it's this, so this S minus I, so it's like for all strategy profiles, and then this is the S minus I component of that strategy profile.
So status quo gives some worst case minimum.
Yeah. Status quo is terrible, right? So it's basically anything that anybody does from the status quo when PG holds is going to be not bad for everybody else, right? So if you're doing it individually, if you're doing it as a coalition, it's not going to be hurting other people. So it's a bit of a weird assumption, right? Because it feels like a strong assumption. PG, you're like, it's like, oh really? We're starting out at such a bad situation where anything anybody does to change the situation is better for everybody else, or at least as good. And then you look at like a whole bunch of like popular games where you can choose which start out with a bad Nash equilibrium, right? Such as, you know, PDs. Threshold public goods games, of course, have a bad one and a good one. We'll choose the status quo to be the bad one when nobody's contributing. Centipede game, of course, Nash equilibrium, you just end the game immediately. Anyway, that good? I feel like turning to you and asking if you're entertained after every part. I watched Gladiator last week again, the original, but in Japanese. Really, they don't quite get it, you know. Like the bit where it's like, there was a dream that was Rome, it shall be realized, is like, yes, make Rome like it was before. Doesn't really work. Okay, a couple of examples of games, two-player games. Say, for example, a stag hunt with 2 stags. So to be your typical stag hunt if you got rid of one of the stags. But in this case, you've got 2 stags. So not only do you possibly want to, well, there's the Nash equilibrium where neither of the 2 players hunts the stag, they both go for the hare. And then there's equilibria where they go for stag 2, and there's equilibria where they go for stag 1. So in a situation like this, you know, if 2 players could coordinate, they might want to switch from hare to one of the stags. And it's hard, in this case, it's hard to come up with an individualistic reason why the players, without working together, would switch to stag 1 or stag 2, right, as equilibrium. Because there's no a priori reason to prefer one stag over another. I guess it gets even trickier if you then have an asymmetric strategy for catching your stag, which basically involves, I don't know, I run after the stag and poke it with a stick, and the stag runs away, and then you jump out from behind a tree and get the stag, right? That's essentially what we have here. Again, this is probably even trickier too, because even if there was something salient about stag 1, at least in the first case, let's say stag 1 is a very salient stag for some reason. Because he's stag number 1, they actually do have numbers painted on them. Imagine that. So we're like, well, we should probably go for 1. It's kind of like, it's the ace of stags. But in this case, that still wouldn't help you because, you know, relative to changing your strategies together, you would have a coordination issue. Anyway, those type of games will be fine. Oh, more maths. So this is going to be the set of collaborative opportunities for a set of players. So remember, we have set M players, and we're going to look at a subset of T players out of the M. Okay, so it's a subset of players T, and we're going to give the set of collaborative opportunities for some subset of players. And this is, well, I'll do this before the maths, the ways in which individuals in T could improve their payoffs, that's right, switching together, the ways they could improve their payoffs, leaving the strategies of individuals outside of T fixed. Okay, so it's the set of strategy profiles such that for all, well, let's start with everyone else. In the red here, we have everybody outside set T stays at the status quo. And the people in T do something that's not the status quo, so they all change to something not the status quo, such that the resulting profile is better for them, better for the players in T, for each of them, than the status quo. So we're all sitting at the status quo, we get a little group of 3 of us together, and we say we can do something great. And then we do the great thing, or no, we're not even doing it yet. We're just talking about it. We say, well, if this bunch of people stay doing the same thing, you probably think they will, right? So if they stay doing the same thing and we change in this way, then we will be better off. Fine. So that's a set of that. There may be numerous ways we can do this, numerous ways we could change our strategies, and those are the set of collaborative opportunities. Curly CT. Probably keep it here just in case it disappears. Curly CT, where T is a subset of all the players. Imagine a set of players in the M-player prisoner's dilemma. What will the collaborative opportunities look like? Well, if it's just one player, they have no collaborative opportunity, right? There's no way they can change their strategy that makes them better off, keeping everybody else the same. If we're playing a 2-player prisoner's dilemma, well, if there's 2 of us, then clearly there's collaborative opportunity to make it better for both of us by switching to both cooperating. If there are many players, we're playing an M-player PD, there's some minimum number of us that's going to need to be part of the coalition to make it worth our while. Right, so that's the n is the least integer such that n times the benefit here is more than the cost. Where n is, of course, going to be less than or equal to m. It's going to equal, m's the number of players. Right? So possibly if there were a 3-player prisoner's dilemma, you might only need 2 to make it worth our while. And there, for us, the collaborative opportunity would be switched to that. There could be multiple collaborative opportunities. Imagine a 3-player prisoner's dilemma where the set we're considering is all of us, and then we're thinking, what strategy profiles could we switch to make everything better for all of us? Now imagine n is equal to 2. So in that case, any 2 of us switching would make it better for ourselves, but we'd also make it better for the free rider, right? And all 3 of us switching would also make it better for everybody in the set T. So it's like we could although, you know, here I'm saying you're not switching to the status quo, so that's, you know, carves it out a bit, but that's, yeah. But in some cases, you could think of situations where you could get together with a group and agree to keep some people the same. Here, that's ruled out for a group T here. Although even if we were all collaborators, you could still get just 2 of us doing it. Right. The ways, please, let's. So what we're going to, so far we've only spoken about the possible opportunities for some group who might do something different. Then we will talk about everybody else. It will affect them, yes. Now, of course, if PG holds our public goods assumption, it won't hurt them. In other situations, it could hurt them. If we agreed to take your money, then it would hurt you. It would hurt the person whose money is being taken. But if PG holds, it won't. Of course, you can see we're kind of building a setup where we'll have groups of players who will change their strategies together. And then the question would be, or will be, once we formed our little coalition and made the change, do you all stay playing the status quo, or could you do something else? But stay with me. We see a little bit of that. We're going to assume the set of collaborative opportunities is non-empty for some subset of players. Otherwise, it's not interesting. That is, if this is what you love, that is, the status quo is not a strong equilibrium in the sense of Aumann 1959. Okay, so we'll talk about the remainder. So first we had the set of collaborative opportunities. And now, following a collaborative opportunity being exploited, other players might change, of course. It could just be instinctive. I see a bunch of you plotting, right? And I'm left out. I might just instinctively change what I'm doing. Who knows? Following exploitation of a collaborative opportunity by T, if the remainder, M set minus T, adjusted their strategies in some way, so this is just allowing anything, the outcome would be in the set C star T, which says it's a set of strategy profiles such that S, so S is in a collaborative opportunity for T. So this set of players T takes a collaborative opportunity, and then everybody else does something. So I'm just letting that be free for everybody else at the moment. So that's C star T. So the star is saying, just allowing everybody else to change in response to seeing me and my bunch of collaborative schemas doing something, changing our strategy. Other people might do something as well. No, they're playing the status quo.
They're playing the status quo.
Yes, of whichever game we're thinking of.
And they're getting some payoff.
There's some status quo payoff, yeah.
And then some group decides to change their strategy and play something else.
Yes.
And then that affects the rest of them.
That will affect everybody else as well, yes. It doesn't have to be a public goods game, but if you assume PG, it does have those flavors, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to correlate with Sylvia's question. I mean, there was this paper that Sylvia had written a long time ago about people, that there can be a group who may not wish to participate in the public goods game.
Right.
And they get a different payoff.
Okay, there's no outside option. You can't leave the game here. You don't. You're in whatever game it is. It could be, of course, that you could have a setup where a status quo is the outside option. You know, if you wrote a game with an outside option, you could set the status quo as being don't participate. Yes. So the kind of timeline we're going to think about, a good way of thinking about it is status quo of society, some set of players changes in a way that benefits them. The other players change in some way. So I'm leaving that very general, very open so far. Of course, if you want to model a specific situation, you want to be specific about it. So you might, with the M-player prisoner's dilemma, a nice way to talk about it would be to say, some set of at least N players cooperate together. They switch together to cooperation because it's good for them. they benefit from a joint switch to cooperation if there's at least n of them, so they switch together. And then the remainder of the players stay defecting. Yeah. So that's acceptable, that's within here. That's the case where the response of everybody else is just, doesn't matter. Don't change anything. In this case, well, it's the case where the response of everybody else is to play your strictly dominant strategy, right? Which would seem like a good thing to do if you're just making a decision on your own. Okay, is everyone still with me? Great. Of course, asking that question is interesting, right? Because nobody wants to put their hand up first and say, sorry, I'm lost. You could do with some kind of coordinating device, like a little button you press and it's anonymous. And when enough people press that button, a red light comes on, and then you realize that at least 5 other people aren't following, and you can ask your question. I should work for PwC. I shouldn't be here, right? I should be there. Anyway, we have a game. Sorry. And we've done that. The next part is types and behavior. And you already kind of know what's going to be going on. There are 2 types of individual, those who can share intentions, SI types, and those who cannot, N types. This group of individuals encounter a problem, gamma, so they encounter this game. And so this MSI is the set of SI types within the player set. So I've taken players from the population, matched them together to play a game, which could actually even be an asymmetric game, as long as they're equally likely to be put in any position in the game. I've matched them to play a game, I've put them in positions, and some of those are SI types, and some of those aren't. So MSI, subset of the player set of SI type individuals within the group. And this is where I tell you the outcome of the game, given the types. Now, it looks a bit messy. I'll take it step by step. The first part says, if for all subsets of players out of the set of SI types, there's no collaborative opportunity, then nothing happens. So that says there's no set of SI types in that instance of the game who have a collaborative opportunity. So for example, in a prisoner's dilemma, it could be that you have fewer than n SI types, in which case there is no way they can make an improvement for themselves by changing their strategy from the status quo, which is defect. So if you can't do anything, you don't do anything, and nothing happens. Right? That's I think I've got it in words here. Yeah, that's the first one. There's no set of SI types in the group able to exploit collaborative opportunity. The status quo prevails. 2, otherwise, randomly select according to whichever distribution you want to choose. The theorem will apply. But of course, again, for individual circumstances, you might want to have a specific distribution. Select some set of SI type individuals that has a collaborative opportunity. Yeah. So some of your SI type individuals, I'm going to select a subset, or all of you, all of the SI type individuals, that has a collaborative opportunity. You are going to take that collaborative opportunity, and then everybody else is going to do something in response. So that's, we're choosing S star in the C star T. So some set of SI types changes to their benefit, people respond. So this, when I say randomly select some set, it could be a random selection of, you could just put all the weight on selecting all of them. So it could say select all of the SI types in this prisoner's dilemma, so that if there's at least n of them, they're all going to participate in a collaborative opportunity and they'll all switch to cooperate. remember that because I'll give you a graph later. So, okay, so quite simple. If this
Mathematically, CT is set of profiles.
yes, CT is the set of profiles after a collaborative opportunity is exploited by T. It's a set of set of profiles that happen after T collaborates to their own benefit. And C star T is after T collaborates to their own benefit and everybody else does something. Yeah. If some set are able to exploit a collaborative opportunity, some opportunity is exploited and the behavior of the players outside of the collaborating set may change as a consequence. Sometimes we add an additional assumption. Good, I've forgotten this assumption was so ugly. But this assumption, R, is an assumption on the responses. So up to now, I've just said the responses can be anything. Given the time, I am going to give you the verbal version of R. Is that okay? And leave the maths behind just now, and you can come to the paper or come back to me later. The verbal version of R is, so this is a restriction on the response to a collaboration. So if I see these guys changing their strategy to benefit themselves, then it says any individual's response to a collaboration by a set T can be construed either as part of a better response by some group of players or individual to either the status quo or a better response to the strategy profile after they collaborate. So the players who change their strategy, so I need to choose, let's choose, well, I'm sorry for you, you're at the front, you have to suffer. So you three are all collaborating, and then if I change what I'm doing in response to your collaboration, it means one of two things. It means either on my own or as part of some other group, either I'm playing a better response to the status quo, so we are also looking at the status quo and saying, hey, let's change as well, or we're playing a better response to what you're doing. It's kind of, given what you're doing, there's actually a way we could improve as well. So that's a kind of rationality assumption. It's saying that while I was writing the 2017 paper, I had it down as the no suicide assumption, right? Why? Because it says that any response to a collaboration should be rational. It should be for our own benefit, because otherwise you get strange things such as, imagine collaborative types. If you have highly associative matching, you could be very likely to be in a group with your own type. But then, if in response to you collaborating, I jump off a cliff, that's going to reduce the fitness of the collaborative types a lot, and then I can artificially induce an evolutionary stable state where nobody's collaborating just by inducing really stupid reactions to rational collaboration, right? So R is a rationality condition. That's good. I just remembered right then why I called it R. So, fine. Final part of the model, the matching protocol. So this is, remember we were taking the players from the population. This is the constraint on how to do it. Obviously you could do it uniformly, that's fine. Uniform matching is completely acceptable. Examples all use uniform matching. In general, though, well, the share of SI types, remember, is XSI. The share of N types is XN. We have the population state. Each member of the population is matched to play this game in a group of M individuals. Now, given an individual, who wants to be this individual? Can I have Don't, everyone's looking away. It's very sad. Chosen. You're an individual, aren't you? Yes, exactly. I thought you were. So, given an individual, which applies to everyone else as well, Z is a random variable which denotes the number of SI types amongst the other M-1 individuals with whom you are matched. Yeah. So if you're matched with three other individuals, Z is going to take values from 0 to 3. But it could be that your matching probabilities depend on your own type, right? So this is the probability that you'll be matched to K other SI types, conditional on your own type being an SI type. And this is the probability you'll be matched to K SI types, given that your own type is an N type. So we allow assortative matching. Also disassortative matching, though in the limit, close to 0 and 1, you can't have disassortative matching. Okay, so we've got matching. And a matching protocol specifies these probabilities for all values of X. So for all states, it specifies the matching probabilities. And we want our matching probabilities to be continuous in X. So we don't want to allow any monkey business with like discontinuous jumps in matching probabilities when you change the population shares a little bit. And we have this condition here, which is a balance condition. And some of you are probably going to say, yes, obviously. How could you not have that condition? What does this condition say? Now, any particular group of players that you've collected together is going to have, well, could have some SI types and some N types, right? So imagine a group that has K SI types and M minus K N types. So this would be the kind of, every group like that has that ratio. And you want to make that ratio the same as the shares in the population that are in such groups. So at the top that's the share of SI types, and this is the probability that they are with K minus 1 other SI types. Because to get to K in total, it's SI types being matched with K minus 1 SI types. Whereas at the bottom, what share of N types are in that group? Well, it's the total mass. What mass of N types are in that group? It's the mass of N types times by the probability that they're matched to K SI types, right? Because they're not an SI type themselves. So for an N type to be in a group with, say, 3 SI types, it needs to match to 3 of them. For an SI type to be in a group with 3 SI types, it needs to match to 2 of them. And so that's balancing the population shares to the group share. And I just want to emphasize that, because sometimes people see something like this and they assume that I'm assuming some type of assortativity in matching. I'm not. This is satisfied by uniform matching. If you're just randomly picking binomially according to population shares, it's satisfied. Anyway. We're done with the model. So, given a game and some behavioral rules satisfying, well, C, which was the way we chose a strategy profile in C star T, and some matching profile, we let these FSIX and FNX denote the expected fitnesses. And we look at evolutionary stable state, which is just, in this simple one-dimensional setup, it's just what I drew on the diagram before, where you're crossing 0 with the fitness differences. Well, basically, it's this here and this here. I don't think I've lost too many people, have I? You don't need to understand every bit of why, of the balance condition, but got the rough idea. And yeah, we're back to where we started. Again, this is recapping the model that we're looking at. We have the types, we randomly match according to a balance condition. This gives us an outcome according to the rules we said. Some people collaborate, other people change, perhaps in a rational way, a way that can be rationalized as well in response to a collaboration. This gives expected fitness, and then you can look and see what's the evolutionary stable shares of collaborative types. It's more than 0. Okay, so here's an anticlimactic theorem 1 here, is that if these conditions hold, so if we've got this way of choosing an outcome, if we've got rational reactions to that, if balance holds and public goods holds, then it's more than 0, right? So we've got at least some of you imagining you're a continuum. My eyesight isn't that bad, but you know, let's imagine you're a continuum. At least some of you, it's not stable at an ESS to have none of you being able to collaborate. It seems like a fairly weak result given all the things we've got here. We'll look at some examples in a second. But the intuition is collaboration is a mutualistic act, not an altruistic act. Therefore, when SI types collaborate, they improve their own payoffs relative to the status quo, holding fixed the strategies of the non-collaborators. Okay, so that's the first step. If the rest of you stayed doing the same thing as before status quo, the collaborators would improve. Step 2, PG ensures that however the other guys respond, it doesn't hurt the collaborators, right? Because I can't say, hey, we're collaborating, and in response you attack us mercilessly, right? You're not allowed to do that because that would violate PG. Any change to your strategy can't hurt us. And so far, so that's good. That means that our collaboration ends up being good for the people collaborating. But we're going to need more, because to deal with the possibility of being matched to assortative matching, positive assortative matching, we don't want to be able to hurt other people of the same type who are around us, right? So we don't want clusters of collaborators to cannibalize one another by collaborating to wage merciless war on one another. So we don't want to hurt the non-collaborators either. So furthermore, PG implies that players weakly gain from being in a group in which collaboration takes place, even if they themselves are not a collaborator. Still not done. R together with PG ensures the response to collaboration by non-collaborators weakly increases the payoffs of non-collaborators. Okay, so we've got 4 steps, and they're just looking at the 4 different ways that collaborators can affect collaborators and non-collaborators can affect collaborators and non-collaborators. And basically, the outcome is all very sunny. Everybody's getting happier compared to the status quo. The last step is a key one that comes from balance, because I said when collaboration occurs, the first 4 steps have said that when collaboration occurs, we're all happy. Like, we collaborate, we're happier, you guys are all happier as well. Okay, so how's that going to lead to the evolution of non-zero amounts of collaboration? Because possibly we're making you even better off than we're making ourselves, right? And the answer lies in the matching. As an SI type, I am going to be more likely to be in a group in which collaboration occurs. Why? Because take the prisoner's dilemma. You need at least n collaborators, at least n SI types to lead to a collaboration. If I am an SI type, I only need to draw n-1 SI types for collaboration to be possible. If I'm not an SI type, I need to draw n. Now, if there are very few n types in the very few SI types in the population, very few possible collaborators, you're almost, well, how likely are you to have n collaborators relative to n+1? Very likely, right? If there's very few of you, almost all the time that you are able to collaborate, it's going to be right on the boundary. You're going to have the minimum number of collaborators required to go. And then you can ask, what's the probability of being in a minimal set of collaborators? Again, I get this bonus because I'm a collaborator that I only need n-1. If you think of a binomial setup, I need something of the order of, well, XSI is very small, and I need that basic something of the order of XSI to the n minus 1, whereas if you're a non-collaborator, you need a probability of this order, which when SI is very small, is going to be a lot smaller than this. So that's why when there are a small number of collaborators in the population, the SI types outperform the N types. And formally, you can show it with this balance condition. And again, I emphasize, it's not a sortativity, right? It's just the fact that you yourself count in any game you're playing. Similar to a conditional cooperation type thing, right? Because you're conditioning on your own type in how behavior changes. Right. Corollary. Let n be the lowest number of players required to have a collaborative opportunity. If n is everybody, then, so if you require, let me say this in words because of the timing. If to have any type of collaborative opportunity at all, we need everybody to be participating, then what can we say about the set of non-collaborators when that happens? Well, it's empty, right? So then we don't need to care about them. We only have to ask, are we benefiting ourselves, right? If the answer is yes, then it's always good to be a collaborator, because a non-collaborator, it's like, can anything happen in my group? No, because we require everybody to join in. So we stay at the status quo. In the prisoner's dilemma, imagine you've got n players, so imagine you need all of them to cooperate for it to be worth the while, right? In that case, anytime you're a non-collaborator, nothing ever happens that's not the status quo. You can never free ride. And if you're an N type, if you're an SI type, when you're matched into a set of SI types, that's great. You all play cooperate and you gain. And so there's always an advantage for any value of XSI when that's the case. So if collaboration requires everybody, it's stable for, in fact, it's the only stable state is for everybody to be an SI type. So that's, well, it shows you something. It shows sometimes if you made it a bit harder to collaborate, so you required everybody, that might actually encourage the evolution of being able to collaborate, right? Because you've got rid of the possibility of free riders. Okay, great. So we go straight to this, which illustrates a bunch of things. And I think this will probably take us about to the end, because we have 13 minutes left, although there is a bit more. This is several lines on a screen. It also represents so with the prisoner's dilemma, you get a prisoner's dilemma under some assumptions. Here are the assumptions we're making. They're the ones I've already told you, that if there are at least n SI types, they switch to C. They switch to cooperating, which in this setup is playing 1. They switch to cooperating. If there are enough SI types in the game that they can all gain by switching from defect to cooperate, then they do so. Given that rule of behavior, and then everybody else in the game stays playing defect. Given that rule of behavior, you get a X star, which is your evolutionarily stable share, evolutionarily stable state, which is your shares of SI types and N types in the population. So this is drawing that X star for, this is X star SI. It's the evolutionarily stable share of SI types in the population on the y-axis. And this is for a prisoner's dilemma Well, there's a couple I do. I do it for 4 players, which is going to be red, and I do it for 7 players, which is blue. And we're assuming the benefit that goes to, well, everybody gets a benefit B for each cooperator. We're assuming over here, I guess I'll do it on this side so you can see, that the benefit is equal to 1. We're normalizing B equal to 1. And this is the cost, and we're increasing the cost of playing cooperate. So the benefit from each cooperator is 1, and this is what happens as we increase the cost of cooperation. Now, what things can you notice? Well, one thing is, in accordance with corollary 1, if the cost gets high enough, then it's stable, well, but not too high that it doesn't make sense for everybody to cooperate, then it's stable for everybody to be an SI type. So in the 4-player case, if the cost of cooperation goes above 3, you need every player to cooperate to make it worthwhile to have a coalitional move, to have collaboration occur. And in that case, it's evolutionarily stable to have the entire population as SI types, as collaborative types. What happens before that is you'll see it's non-monotonic, right? Why? Why do we get jumps? Well, you get jumps wherever you suddenly require a greater share of players to participate to make collaboration worthwhile. So at first, for costs between 1 and 2, you require to say, let's deal with this red line for m equals 4. You require 2 out of the 4 players to switch to C together for them to actually gain from it. And this share decreases as the cost increases until eventually the cost is, it's almost not worthwhile for 2 players together to switch. But when there's because they're not getting very much from it, but when there's a switch, so that all of a sudden, whereas even though let's think about it this way, as the cost of contribution increases, you're reducing the gains to the collaborators who are changing their strategy in a mutualistically improving way, right? They're still benefiting. They never do it when they don't benefit, but it's reducing. But what's happening to the payoffs of free riders? In that situation, nothing, right? Staying the same. So you're reducing the benefits to collaborators, nothing's happening to the payoffs of free riders, and so the share of SI types decreases. But you eventually hit a point where, well, you hit a point where the amount of collaboration drops, and you have very few, well, you then have you cross this border, and then there's no sets of 2 collaborating anymore. So those sets of 2 who collaborated were getting very little for bonus for themselves, right? Because the cost was so close to 2 times benefit. But they were still generating a significant amount for free riders. So when they finally stop collaborating and we require sets of 3, that causes a drop in the expected payoffs of free riders. Is everybody kind of with me here? So suddenly, this reduction in collaboration by players who are benefiting from it, but not by very much, this reduction, well, they lose a little bit, but the people who lose more are the free riders. And so you have this drop in free rider payoff, and that means that the evolutionarily stable share of collaborators jumps up again. Of course, this is a drawing of xi star, right? It's the equilibrium shares of collaborators. But you can work from this. You can map from this to the amounts of cooperation you see, you would see in this game being played by this populations, right? Because you know the matching technology. This is for uniform matching. You know the matching technology. You can work out for each share of SI, you can work out how much cooperation you'd expect to see. And you see then that's also going to be non-monotonic, right? Because right over here, when there's almost no collaborating, there's almost no SI types, you're going to almost never see cooperation in the population. But you cross that threshold, and all of a sudden, sometimes SI types are going to be matched in situations where they do collaborate or cooperate. So this is a kind of threshold effect that you get with the PD that's, I don't know, I like it. But partially because of the economist thing, I like it because it has potential for stories about organizational design, for example, right? Team size. You could say, it's great, guys, it's great. We're reducing the cost of cooperating in your team from this value to this value. And then everything goes wrong because you just created a free riding incentive. Before we end here, this is threshold public goods games for 7 players and fixed thresholds. As you might expect, well, if everybody has to participate, everybody's an SI type when it's stable. That goes down in the number of participators, right? So if only 2 people are required, you get a kind of free riding, right, that goes on. And it's nice, it has no discontinuities in this graph, unlike the prisoner's dilemma one. Okay, 4 minutes, 20 seconds. Plausible sounding conjecture, which I think I've spoken enough that you're going to know the answer anyway. If collaborating players gain fitness from their collaboration following any response by the other players, then SI will evolve. And this is wrong, right? For the reason that things might go wrong when we take your money. Because if we've got high assortativity, so that if we're the same type, the third player is also likely to be the same type as us. If we gain payoff of 1 from attacking you, and you get minus 1,000, then that's bad for the average payoff of our type. But it sounds plausible. I suspect, if I stuck this theorem, if I stuck it in a theorem and tried to publish it, someone would say, this is obvious, reject, right? It's that type of result, but it is wrong. Okay, I give an example on that. Note, this is interesting because positive assortativity is usually seen as a good thing for promoting good things, right? Good people stick together. Most of the literature on altruism sustains it by inducing positive assortativity in some manner. Generally, that's not a criticism, it's just saying you need the positive assortativity across strategies, right? You're looking for C to be played in situations where C is played. Cooperate to be played in situations where cooperate is played. But collaboration is amoral. Even bad people collaborate. So, maybe we should expect to observe some of this in a broad range of situations. As it's mutualistic, we can expect it to emerge even in situations that are hostile to the emergence of altruism. So this is the kind of proliferation when rare. So theorem 1, even though I said, oh, we only get 0, it's not very much, it's kind of it's what I've seen called a proliferation when rare result, right? If a little bit enters the population, it spreads up to some level. Okay, here's questions that could be asked, like some instances of altruism might be misidentified consequences of collective agency, and sometimes you might not want to use Nash equilibrium. I used to have a website, don't anymore, not enough money, very sad. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that I've thought about with co-authors, and it seems I'll use my last, well, I won't use the whole 90 seconds, don't worry. One thing that's nice about, and there are slightly different ways, and I've got a few papers on it, is it's multi-purpose. You could stick it to any game, right? The idea of being able to, if I ask some subset of people, if we asked each other, we say, is there any way we can change our behavior to do better relative to, well, something else? We can answer that question. We can answer it for any game. So if you define a trait that does something like that, like this instantiation, you can just throw it at any game. You give me a game, I do it, and then I'll tell you what comes out. It might be what you expect, it might not. So that's one benefit of it, the kind of multi-purposeness of it. And yeah, that is basically it. Thank you very much. Okay. No, it's fine. We've got one over there. Okay, sure. The prisoner's dilemma.
In this case, why is it so that when m is 7, you are having a discontinuity, it is decreasing from that initial value, then why is it increasing?
Okay, so when m is 7, why does that increase there?
Yes.
That's a great question. I do not know. Did I ever know? I don't know that either. So I can't even give a meta example right there. I'm sorry. I mean, I need to look in the appendix. It seems to decrease at first from 3 to 4, right? Does it? Or is that increasing? It's worth checking. I'll see if I can find the Mathematica file, and then we know. You're very good at asking these questions. Yeah. That's a good question. Is it always increasing? And if so, why? Yeah. That's those discontinuity jumps. Okay, anything else? Let's see. Are you not entertained? Okay.
Do you elaborate on one of the statements in the summary? Could I see that statement in a? So instances of altruism may be misidentified consequence of collective agency. Can I say it the other way around, that collective agency could be one reason of altruism?
Could it? I mean, it could. I mean, you could think about how they interact, I guess, right? It could make altruism more. I mean, it gives you a way to implement it in some sense, I guess, like, or get started. Yeah, I mean, it can help you to get more altruism spreading. So we had with Simon, that guy on there, we had a paper that looks at the spread on networks of altruistic behavior under this type of thing. And it can help. They can work together.
And this threshold public good, again, I'm coming back to it, but then it's seen in animals, right, that you have a threshold before you go for hunting packs of lions.
Yeah.
It is seen unless they are, let's say, there is a threshold, they just go. So maybe even for non-humans.
Could be. I mean, this is, one of the things that inspired me to think about this and read about this was reading about the debate over whether chimpanzees were playing Nash equilibrium when hunting monkeys or exhibiting jointly intentional behavior. Like, do they actually want to take up positions that are good for hunting the monkey, or are they just arriving and taking up a position that maximizes their own chance of getting the monkey first, and thus by, through and thus having a kind of optimal solution emerging? So I read some stuff on that. It was quite interesting. But so yes, it could be. In answer to your question, like especially in a network setup, right? So there's, if I'm not wrong, and I can check with Christian, is one of the 5 rules for cooperation is a kind of networks thing, right? It's like enough assortativity in parts of the network. And so if you've got something like cooperation spreading, you can sometimes get situations on a network where you've got a little bit of a sticking point and you can't perhaps move any further just through an individual switch without perhaps some kind of error. But if these 3 could come together and say, actually, let's do this, that can help spread. I mean, that applies to coordination games as well, not just prisoners' dilemmas. So, yes. Okay, anyway, I would say for this thing, it gives you something, it gives you ideas to play with, right? And it's, yeah, I mean, it's just handy. It's a trait, it's important. It's, some people argue being good at it's what makes us uniquely human, you know? Or that it's what made us uniquely intelligent, right? Think back to this, the kind of shared intentionality intelligence hypothesis, or Vygotskian intelligence hypothesis, that by figuring out how to solve problems together, you are developing theory of mind, which, you know, or at least a deeper levels of theory of mind. That's kind of beyond my pay grade, you know. People in this room for whom they'll be able to tell me more on what's the latest with that. Anyway, thanks again. Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been great. Was that one too slow or too fast? Okay. Let's have a break.